So here's the real question. How do dentists like you, who aren't willing to let insurance dictate how you will run your practice, who want to create incredibly profitable practices without sacrificing your time or sanity, how do you create the strategies to ensure your practice not only survives but thrives in the 21st century? That's the blaring question, and Dr. Steve Schlintz is here to provide the answers. Welcome to Dental Practice Freedom Radio.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dr. Steve Schlintz, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Dental Practice Freedom Radio. And I want to continue on with our little journey of moving from disease care to healthcare. This is going to be, I think this is the fourth installment. I'm not entirely sure. I kind of lost track, but I know what I want to talk about, and it's this concept of building around a blue ocean. So the last episode that we were talking about was defining a blue ocean, creating something unique and special in your practice. And what I want to talk about in this episode is actually what do you do once you define what that blue ocean is? And this is where I get a lot of questions from dentists that they're asking, okay, so I know what that is, but how do I stop doing what I'm doing and then be able to implement this new blue ocean that I have? Now, here's the thing. You aren't going to be able to stop doing what you're doing. What I want you to think is something totally different. There's a couple ways that I want you to look at this. And one is from kind of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then the second one is what I learned from Grant Cardone. So with Stephen Covey, he talked about this concept of circle of influence. And he had these circles, right? And so if you're competing in a red ocean, so you do predominantly crowns and, patients are calling into your office. What do you charge for a crown? Are you in network with my insurance? Blah, 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 right? You're kind of in a red ocean to that patient. There's no true way to differentiate yourself. So in this big red ocean, the first thing you have to do is you've got to continue to do the status quo at some level to keep the doors open. You don't want to drastically change something too fast because when you do that, you actually put yourself in a serious bind. Ask me how I know. I'm speaking from experience here and saying I did some things in my practice that I probably wouldn't do again, and I want you to be able to avoid that. So I would not suggest you just completely radically change your practice overnight, but what you will want to do is start to say, okay, out of this big red massive ocean, how do I get one little tiny blue dot in the middle that I can start with and then grow out from there? And so as you continue to work, that little dot gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually what will happen is that red has turned completely blue and you will be swimming in this ocean that you want. I want you to be thinking that way. And so you might be asking, how do I do that? It might be something as simple as 2 hours every week. We're going to do one new patient experience different, and we're going to start to implement the things that I've been learning and the things that I want to do in my practice so that I can take that 2 hours, and then it might turn into a 3-hour block, and then it might turn into a half day, then it might turn into a full day, and you'll continue to work on your schedule until you get to a point where you'll have more blue ocean days than red ocean days. And then you can have a decision. Let's say you work 4 days in your practice and you get to a point where 3 of those 4 days are a blue ocean day. You're doing that thing that you really want to do. You can start to, at that point, analyze, is it even worth it now for me to continue to be in insurance if you're insurance? I'm taking this, this, and this, but I don't want to take this, this, and this anymore. Can I financially do the things I need to do and still be successful? I will tell you that most of the time when you get in that situation, by cutting the cord, you will actually become much more profitable. Now, every situation is different, so I don't want you to say, well, Steve said to go do that. I don't want you to do that. You're probably going to want to get with, whether you call me or talk to a consultant or whatever the case may be, you want to start to really be thinking about the decisions you're making before you make them. But once you make that decision and you feel you're in a good position, go all out. Burn the bridges, say this is the way my practice is going to be, and I can guarantee you it will be much more rewarding. The second way I want you to look at this is exactly what Grant Cardone was talking about. And for those of you who know Grant Cardone or don't know Grant Cardone, he's kind of an in-your-face sales guy. And he's built this whole reputation and brand around him. And whether you like him or not, you'll remember who he is. And he talked about this in his wealth creation formula. It was a program that I bought. And he said, as you're starting, your main job, your main goal, if you're trying to accumulate wealth, whether in your practice, outside of your practice, whatever you're doing as a provider, the first thing you have to do is see where your income is and do everything you can to raise the income from that one source. A lot of people ask me, how do you get different streams of income or multiple sources of income? Where do you look? And I have a consulting business. I have a coaching business where I focus a lot on mindset and using Bob Proctor's information. But it didn't always start out that way. And in fact, by not listening to Grant at the beginning, I got away from my practice actually too fast. And I had a lot of financial pain as a result of that because my main source of income I had cut off because I was so driven to get this coaching business off the ground. I wouldn't recommend you actually do that. What I would recommend you do in your practice is you figure out where your main income source is and do everything you can to raise the revenue in that main income source. That's going to give you some freedom to start to play around with this other stuff. So it kind of seems counterintuitive, right? But if you're in one area and you know that you're doing well in that one area, maybe it's crown and bridge, maybe it's dentures, maybe it's implants, maybe it's, whatever the case may be, you're going to want to focus on how do I get really, really good at that so I raise my income, I raise my revenue, which will give me more freedom to do what this blue ocean is if the blue ocean and what you do well are not the same thing. Now, if what you do well is also your blue ocean, you are in great, great shape, okay? So I want you to be thinking about how do I start to navigate this whole idea if I want to be doing something different in my practice than I currently am, but not go broke in the process. How do I raise the level of income and revenue already existing in my patient base and what I'm doing, but then start to implement expanding this blue ocean as I go forward, okay? So I can't stress that enough that, you want to be thinking strategically about this. And then the key is, and I'm not going to get too much into it in this podcast episode, it's just way beyond the scope of this recording here. But what you want to start to do is on that half day or on that day that you create a blue ocean, that is where all of your systems and policies should be gravitating towards, okay? It's almost like you have two different practices at this point. You have one practice that's paying the bills and you're increasing revenue to make this more feasible, but then you also have this other practice that functions totally different. And so you got to work with your team on this and say, okay, so we really almost have two different practices. It's like a practice within a practice. That's what your blue ocean is all about. How do we create the systems and policies necessary to continue to take this blue ocean that we're creating and get this better and better and better? When I do full mouth rehabilitations in composite, one of the questions that always gets asked to me by dentists is, how much do you charge for it? And, the reality is that actually doesn't matter. Every office is different in terms of level of profitability. So if I charge 20, you might have to charge 30 to keep the same level of profit. My question is always, it doesn't matter what you charge at the beginning, you're going to lose money whenever you do one of these cases. And they look at me like, how's that possible? I said, well, let's do the math. When I first started to do these cases, it would take on average 2 full days for me to do it. Now I'm in a position that I can get the majority of the case done minus like touch-ups and adjustments and things like that. I can get it done in 4 hours. So I basically went from a 16 hours to a 4 hours. That means that my profitability, if everything else was the same, had went up by 400% by just learning how to do the cases more efficiently. The only way you're going to get to that point is if you actually do the cases. It's the same thing with crown and bridge. It's the same thing with any dental procedure that you start with. So, when you're starting these blue ocean concepts and you're doing some things that are outside the box, understand you're going to lose money. There's no way you're going to be as profitable as you will be 2 years from now as when you just started. So that's why it's really, really important that you continue to focus on your revenue and your profit growth on the red ocean part of your business, which will give you the freedom to get better at your blue ocean strategies. So hopefully you got some value out of this. And the next episode, what we're going to talk about is the last piece of the puzzle, which is marketing around the blue ocean. How do you market differently now that you have this blue ocean in place? And make no mistake about it, you will totally market differently. And I'll talk about some strategies that I use in my own practice. So hopefully you get some value out of this. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again shortly.
Thank Thank you so much for listening to this episode on Dental Practice Freedom Radio with Dr. Steve Schlitz. We'll see you on the next episode.